The Galactic Academy of Historical Preservation stood as a monument to memory itself, its crystalline spires reaching toward the violet sky of Centaurus Prime. Within its halls, the greatest minds of 1,000 species studied the remnants of civilizations that had risen and fallen across the galaxy's billion-year history. Angela Morrison walked through the Hall of Lost Empires with barely contained excitement, her boots echoing against the polished obsidian floor. This was her first week as an exchange student from Earth, and everything still felt surreal. Just 3 years ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now Angela stood among beings whose ancestors had been exploring the stars when humanity's distant ancestors were still learning to walk upright. "You seem fascinated by the dead," remarked Paul Vezerix, her Korvathi study partner. His 4 eyes blinked in succession, a gesture Angela had learned indicated amusement. His scaled skin shimmered with iridescent blues and greens under the museum lighting. "Not dead," Angela corrected, pausing before a display case containing what appeared to be a ceremonial blade. "Just sleeping, waiting to be remembered." Paul's cranial ridge rippled, the Korvathi equivalent of a chuckle. "Humans are such poets. My people prefer facts to fantasies." They continued deeper into the museum, passing exhibits dedicated to the progenitors, the Velkan Empire, the Crystal Collective. Each had dominated the galaxy in their time. Each had fallen to war, plague, or simply the crushing weight of entropy. Then Angela stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers pressed against the transparent aluminum of a display case, her reflection ghosting over the artifact within. "Paul," she whispered. "Paul, look at this." The Korvathi approached, his translator device humming softly as it parsed her tone. Concern, confusion, and something else. Recognition. Inside the case lay a piece of metal, roughly the size of a dinner plate. It was clearly a fragment of something larger, its edges jagged where it had been torn away. But what remained was pristine, untouched by time despite the placard dating it at 127,000 years old. Etched into its surface was a symbol, a shield quartered into 4 sections, with a lion in the upper left, a star in the upper right, a mountain in the lower left, and a hammer in the lower right. Above it all, a banner with letters in an ancient script. Angela knew that crest. She had seen it her entire life, carved above her grandfather's fireplace, stamped on her grandmother's old letters, tattooed on her father's shoulder. It was her family crest. "That's not possible," she breathed. Paul leaned closer, his primary eyes scanning the information display. "The artifact of unknown origin 7442, he read aloud, "discovered in the ruins of the Frontier Collective on Kepler 442b. Composition analysis indicates an iron-titanium alloy with trace elements consistent with Sol system metallurgy, though predating your species' space age by over 120,000 years. The symbols remain untranslated and—" "Morrison," Angela interrupted. "What?" "The letters. They spell Morrison." Her hand trembled as she pointed. "That's my name. That's my family name." Paul's 4 eyes fixed on her, then on the artifact, then back to her. His translator struggled with the silence before he finally spoke. "Angela, this is dated to when your people were barely using stone tools. There must be a mistake, a coincidence." But Angela was already moving, pulling up her personal datapad with shaking hands. She navigated through screens until she found what she was looking for, a photo from last year's family reunion. Her grandfather stood proudly before the Morrison estate's entrance, above which hung a wooden shield, the same exact crest. "Professor Cathal," Angela called out, her voice carrying across the hall. An elderly Zixian curator floated over, his gas-filled containment suit humming softly. "Yes, young human? This artifact, where exactly was it found?" What else was at the site? The professor's photoreceptors dimmed in thought. Ah, yes, 7,442. Fascinating piece. It was recovered from what we believe was a command vessel of some kind. The Frontier Collective was a militant civilization that controlled this sector approximately 127,000 years ago. They were formidable, conquered 17 star systems before they mysteriously vanished. What happened to them? Angela pressed. Unknown. They simply disappeared. No collapse, no recorded defeat. One cycle they controlled a sixth of the known galaxy. The next, silence. Cathal paused. Though there are legends among the older species, stories of a warrior people who appeared from nowhere, fought the Great War against the Collective, and vanished just as mysteriously. The Star Phantoms, some called them. Angela's mind raced. Paul placed a hand on her shoulder, his claws carefully retracted. Angela, what are you thinking? She turned to face him, her eyes bright with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. Not fear, not confusion, pride. I'm thinking that my professor of ancient history back on Earth always said the Morrisons were fighters, soldiers and explorers going back as far as anyone could trace. He said there were gaps in our family history, centuries where we just disappeared from records. You cannot be suggesting? The dates line up, Paul. Humans showing mysterious technological leaps. Cave paintings of sky people around the same period. And now this. She gestured at the crest. What if some of us left? What if a group of early humans, or maybe not so early, got out there somehow? What if we've been playing in the galactic sandbox a lot longer than anyone realized? Professor Cathal drifted closer, his photoreceptors brightening with interest. The metallurgy does match Sol system composition, and there have always been anomalies in the archaeological record, artifacts that shouldn't exist, technologies that appeared and disappeared. The Frontier Collective, Angela said slowly. Did they have a capital? A homeworld? Lost, Cathal replied. Every record of its location was destroyed, almost as if they were covering their tracks, Paul finished, his scientific skepticism warring with mounting evidence. Angela pressed her hand against the case again, feeling the cool surface beneath her palm. Somewhere out there was a world her ancestors had walked, a civilization they had built, fought for, and then abandoned or hidden. They weren't lost, she said quietly. They went home, and they made sure no one could follow. Paul's cranial ridge rippled again, but this time there was no amusement in the gesture. Humans, he said, a new tone of respect in his voice. You really are terrifying. Angela smiled, fierce and proud. We prefer the term persistent. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the crest that had traveled 127,000 years and countless light years to find her again. A message from ancestors she had never known, in a war the galaxy had forgotten. But she would remember, and she would find out the truth. The dead weren't sleeping after all. They were waiting, and Angela Morrison was ready to wake them up.